Welcome in, friends. Thank you for being here today. Let me start by saying from the heart that I couldn't have expected how difficult this whole podcasting thing would be. Not just the technical stuff, but the publishing, the wondering if it's even worth the time and the effort. I struggled to get on here today because I don't know if I'm doing it right? And every week I learn something that I didn't know the week before. And it can get overwhelming that I'm constantly having to learn something. And I said something to someone about showing up. And I said that I keep showing up, not just here, but in other areas of my life, when it still feels like I am evolving for myself. And when I don't see that evolution or progress that fills me up, then I stop showing up for those things. And I'm not sure I've reached that point yet with this, but I'm also pivoting in the whole process. Every time I write or record the things I've written. And so last week, the article that I recorded was about, I touched on areas of bottoms, alcoholic bottoms, and how COVID showed me how the depths of my drinking problem. And I closed offering in this week's episode some of the warning signs that came up on the way to the moment where I realized I was gonna go and get help. So this week's episode, I have written my article for my weekly Substack newsletter, and I'm here to share that with you today. It's entitled Signs I Had a Drinking Problem. Let's dive in. In the world of alcohol use, I see main types. There are the drinkers, obviously, but then there's the problem drinkers. This is the category that I fall into. But the question is, when does something cross over into being a problem? When does something socially acceptable become something else? I ask these questions because people accept mistakes. And people also accept experimentation. People even accept and encourage letting loose. So people accept all this, but especially when someone is under the influence of alcohol. The point here is, many of our cultures, societies, and families are quite lenient on behavior when alcohol is driving the moment. But when behavior leads to mistakes, and those mistakes become patterns, people start noticing. And the drinker now not only is a problem, but is the problem, becomes the problem to the people who are observing. Consequently, over time, they begin to distance themselves. The drinking has shifted from social and fun to something that needs to be guarded in private. Now, we could come from a background where alcohol use was normal. We could have lived with problem drinkers. We could have seen tragedy around people we loved who abused alcohol. Many people who struggle with alcohol grow up never knowing what it means to overcome something like alcohol use disorder. It may feel like everybody drinks and it's okay because everyone makes mistakes and everyone has problems with life. It may never occur to them until much later that their struggles may be directly related to their alcohol consumption. And as long as we can accept the consequences of our drinking, we do not feel like there is anything to be done to change our drinking habits. It's not a problem yet. Not until the consequences are too heavy. Even if we can see how it's affecting others around us. Everything works until it doesn't. This is true for anything. But it has deeper meaning for me when I discuss my relationship with alcohol. I started that relationship when I was about 15. It lasted until I was 36. I'm 39 now. Hindsight has shown me that there were always signs I was a problem drinker. What I want to share are the moments when I started seeing the warnings. What I'm about to share, these are some of the experiences in the few years leading up to the last drink. The times when I really became aware of the scope of my problem with alcohol. First, driving in a state of drunken distress. I accepted an invite to find solace at my cousin's house. I had called her in a heightened emotional space, also drunk. Maybe she knew, or maybe she didn't. To this day, I still don't know. But she suggested I go to her house. So I did. I packed up my son. He was probably 4 at the time. I gathered my travel booze and set out for the 30-minute drive. But less than halfway there on the highway, in tears and full of hopelessness, I look up into the rearview mirror to see police lights flashing, following me. I'm in the middle lane of the highway, and carelessly, I pull to the left shoulder. My son was sitting behind me and was complaining that he needed to pee. So, to the left, for some reason, made more sense because to let him out on the same side of the vehicle seemed logical at the time. At least for a drunk person, it was. I had open booze on the floor of the passenger side, so I stashed it under the passenger seat or in the garbage bag on that side of the car. I can't remember all the details. And then the officer walks up to my window. He looks at my license while I'm explaining that my son needs to pee. Tears rolling down my face. And I further explain my recent separation from his father and the emotional state that I'm in as a result. So he looks up at me and asks, "You have your B license?" I say yes. He continues, "Do you know how fast you were driving?" I say, "I was following traffic," which was true. The officer replies, "I could fine you just for pulling over on the wrong side of the highway." Click, right? It still hadn't dawned on me yet that I had done this wrong. So the officer leaves to go check my documents, and I take out my son to go pee on the side of the road. In the meantime, the officer returns and tells me I was doing 131 kilometers per hour and that he was giving me 4 demerit points and a fine. In my head, in my alcoholic mind, I'm cheering because I'm winning in my head. I'm okay with that consequence because it wasn't a DUI and no one is coming to take my son away today. Thank God. And so I carry on to my cousin's house. At this time, the consequence was still acceptable, and I was okay with that. The next warning sign. Kids know more than we think. On this particular weekend, I'm taking my son and his friend out to lunch. Naturally, I choose a family-friendly burger joint which also sells beer in bottles on ice for $2. We go there. Union Burger. The kids choose to sit at their own table, about 30 feet across from me. We all start eating our food. I crack open my beer. I take a few sips. From across the restaurant, Ryder, my son's friend, yells at me, "Hey, I didn't know you were an alcoholic." He said this casually, with no real judgment, just matter-of-factly. My awareness and acceptance of this statement did not yet quite fully exist for me. My defenses go up, mixed with some embarrassment, and I reply, "Not everyone who drinks is an alcoholic, you know." And we carried on with lunch. But this moment ran over and over in my head for a long time, wondering if he was right. The third warning sign. Drinking alone was easier. At a certain point in my drinking career, I began to enjoy being alone while I drank. I was content, for the most part, in the isolation. I had built it this way. It allowed me to drink how I wanted. Sitting on the couch, watching Netflix series, probably. I have my mug filled with wine, not tea. My son approaches me and asks me if it's beer or wine or tea in my cup. I say wine, and I allow him to take a sip. Yes, wine drinkers can be alcoholics as well. But to my surprise, he says that he likes it. At the time, I laugh because I'm an alcoholic, amused by a child's interest in the taste of alcohol. And this behavior from me mimicked the adults who surrounded me at his age and even younger. Although inside me, I felt something tugging at me each time I would do this with him. I didn't know what that feeling was, just that it was there. Next, warning sign. People are mirrors. I had drove past this man, a stranger, in my bus several times over the course of a couple weeks. He was on the side of the road with a van that had a winter landscape and polar bears painted on it entirely. It was beautiful. He was creating these masterpieces, let's call them carvings, using just a chainsaw and cutting out tree stumps. I was fascinated and intrigued. I decided one day that if I saw him again, I would pull over and say hello. And so I did. He gave me his name and contact and explained his carving business. He seemed much older, and I liked that. I think I messaged him once or twice with questions and asked if he would like to meet up sometime. He said okay. So on Halloween, I told him to meet me at the Upper Thames Brew House. I'm having dinner alone. That's where I'll be. He shows up with a mask made out of bird feathers. It was COVID at this time. I was delighted at the obscenity of it and welcomed him to sit. I was almost done at that point. We walked the trail back to my place for a bonfire. I learned quickly that he was living in his van and had suffered with poor hygiene. Eventually, he started parking his van in my driveway overnights, and over the course of a few years, he would come and go. He was also a problem drinker. It was affecting my reputation. Neighbors began complaining to the police, and more than once, so he had to leave. Funny enough, he came with me to my first 12-step meeting. I stayed. He didn't. Next warning sign. No, everyone does not have blackouts. Blackouts were a part of my normal drinking experience. I had these happen as early on in my drinking career as I can remember. I can't remember people ever talking about this in any way that felt problematic, if at all. To my knowledge, these were a natural and perfectly normal response to drinking. Blackouts were regular, but not frequent, like not weekly or not every time I drank. But I accepted them as part of the drinking package. I hadn't given it much thought until my early 30s. At this time, I developed a very close relationship with alcohol. The closest relationship I had at the time. It was deep. Only alcohol could listen to my sadness, and I depended on it to do just that. I remember days I would look forward to a long Saturday of me, my drink of choice, and my demons dancing in the dark, quite literally. I loved these moments, and I wouldn't change them. They were all that I was at that time, and that was enough. During one of these drunken dances of darkness, I had to be reminded by someone else of the events that took place. And it was over the phone. I was talking to an old high school love that I had fantasies about reconnecting with. I suppose I also had resentments because it never came to pass. He asked me to stop what I was doing because he could feel the toxic vibes reaching his energy and disturbing his life. I didn't know what he was referring to, so I asked for an explanation. He reluctantly, in disbelief of my forgetfulness, explained that I had called him one night during the drunken dancing and told him I was casting a spell around the bonfire. I believed it was possible, but the experience was during a blackout, and I could not recall the events. When an alcoholic tells someone who doesn't have experience with blackouts, often people will not believe us. We could be painted as liars, unwilling to take responsibility for our actions. This contributes to feelings of shame. Blackouts can have terrifying consequences for the alcoholic and for anyone who gets caught in the storms. That's the final warning sign I'm going to share today. And honestly, I would love to have a one-on-one conversation with another recovery friend. And if that's something interesting, or if that calls to you, send me a message and we can link up. We can have it live even and share it with people who might need these kinds of stories. The rest of the piece. During COVID lockdowns, I had a lot of free time because I was paid to be off work, to go down many rabbit holes of research and information gathering. I ended up on the AA website at one point. And it was there that I learned that blackouts were not in fact normal, like I had thought. And so began my acceptance that I had a problem with alcohol and not just a problem with life. Truly unfulfilled, lacking purpose, without dreams, and deep dislike for who I was. I had to stop ignoring my inner child. Things slowly started to change when somewhere down one of these rabbit holes, I started to find answers. I had ignored so many parts of myself for so long, and I was starting to see it. I was living aimlessly. I was living mindlessly. I lacked any intention in my actions. I was stubborn in my lack of beliefs, lack of morals, lack of direction. I started learning about taking responsibility of my life. That I wasn't responsible for anything that had happened to me as a child, but I am responsible for doing the work to move on and grow up into a healthier, emotionally stable human being. And it wasn't until the end of 2022 that I went to get help. That's today's episode. And I hope you found something that resonates. And I'm asking that people share these messages. If you feel called, and if you know anyone who could benefit from this content. So I'm pivoting out of my backstory. I might dabble with it in my future pieces, but I'm going to focus a lot more in the next piece on my mental health and how it relates to my recovery. I hope to see you in the next one. I'm River. You're listening to River's Flow. May our hearts be open and our souls free. Thank you for being here with me today.